There's been a lot of chatter in Blue Jays land of which Blue Jays players could be used as trade pieces. Will it be one of the big names, or will it be some of the guys that have been up and down through AAA? We'll talk about it all on today's episode of Locked On Blue Jays.
You are Locked On Blue Jays, your daily Toronto Blue Jays podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jays, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now the #1 sports podcast network, your team every day.
Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. As always, I'm Brayden Iwasko. He's Carter First. You can find us on Twitter, Brayden5 Iwasko, Carter First 2 as well, and our main one at Locked On Jays. You can follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Locked On Blue Jays, and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already on the YouTube channel, as we're getting close up to that 5,000 mark, and that's all thanks to you guys and what a great season this Toronto Blue Jays team has had. But Carter, trade talk is always happening in Toronto, right? Can they trade these guys for a big name piece? What'll have to be thrown in? We're not going to necessarily go into who they can get, but who are you as Blue Jays fans? And I'm asking this to everybody listening, so please leave us a comment down below. Of the players we're going to talk about today, who is an understandable piece to be traded away? Who would you be okay with? Who wouldn't you? We're going to give you our thoughts and opinions on today's episode, but we really want to hear from you guys in this one. So make sure you leave a comment down below. Carter, this whole conversation gets started because an article came out, and I'll let you sort of dive into it, but an article came out that it was the best trade piece or most tradable player for each team. So who is the Blue Jays' most tradable piece? I went through like 5 guys trying to guess who it was, and it was none of the guys that I assumed that was going to be on as the #1 pick. But who do you got?
I think, this would be a more common pick for just, especially Blue Jays fans that watch the World Series specifically, but obviously the entire season, this guy had a lot of ups and downs. Definitely wouldn't be my #1 pick, my first guy that was be the most tradable piece on the Toronto Blue Jays, but I figured there was going to be at least one article, and we got it from Bleacher Report, and their #1 trade candidate is Jeff Hoffman for the Toronto Blue Jays. So I'm just going to read what they kind of have written here as well. So they could see the Blue Jays trading from their plus of outfielders, especially if they're able to re-sign Bichette, at which they would be bringing back all 13 of these. Again, that's not really important, but for Jeff Hoffman, I don't even know why they threw in that first part because it's not even regarding Jeff Hoffman, but Jeff Hoffman had a .437 ERA during the regular season, and then the Miguel Rojas home run that will live in infamy in Canada. They'll go on to say the Blue Jays won't necessarily be aggressive in selling Jeff Hoffman and shopping Jeff Hoffman, but they should be listening to calls. And one thing that we talked about when we did our Edwin Diaz, and then we just did a Ryan Helsley episode, is that with right now, the way the bullpen market is currently trending, if you did want to unload some cap space and you did want to, go all in on one of those top of the market guys, the Robert Suarez, the Edwin Diaz, we go over all these guys all the time. It would be a little bit more feasible if you did move off of that Jeff Hoffman contract. But in this article, it almost makes it seem like, and just a lot of the Blue Jays fan base makes it seem like Jeff Hoffman is just the worst pitcher to ever live and ever exist in the history of the universe, which is simply not true. Jeff Hoffman can still be a viable pitcher at the major league level. I get why you wouldn't want him to be your closer, at least be giving the closing role right off of spring training. Again, if he has a good spring training, and then maybe if he starts the season as a closer and has a better start to the season, I'd be more inclined to do that, but I wouldn't be as so inclined to, just give Jeff Hoffman the closing role and then, just kind of wipe my hands clean of that. He definitely needs some competition. There definitely has to be other additions added to the back end of that bullpen. But yeah, surprising candidate for me on why you'd want to move off of a guy that can definitely help you a ton next year out of that bullpen.
Yeah, I just think this would be a selling. I don't even want to say selling low, because it's not like he had the worst season of all time, like you sort of alluded to, Carter, saying, backing him up a little bit. He wasn't the worst thing ever. But I do understand where Bleacher Report is coming from in this article, because yes, if they do want to go out and make one of those big splash back end bullpen guys, they are going to have to unload some salary. They're not going to spend $50 million, $40 million on 2 guys in the bullpen. That's just not going to happen. Again, I would be very fine with it, but that's not going to happen when they also want to get a starter. They also want to bring back Bichette or Kyle Tucker or both, and with some people thinking. again, I don't think that happens either. But I don't know. I feel like maybe there's a bounce back possibility for Jeff Hoffman going into 2026. I think he's got to get the long ball under control. That is his big killer right now. I just don't know what you trade him for. And if it's for nothing, then why not keep him and just add in other spots to this bullpen? Because I said it before, Card, when we had this conversation on those big time bullpen arms. I don't necessarily think that the Toronto Blue Jays are going to go out and get one of them. As much as I would love that to happen, I just don't think that's in the cards for this team this year. I think their focus is starting pitching and then bringing in a massive free agent, either Bichette or Kyle Tucker.
I think for me, it's that like you're looking at what this team needs and their positional needs, and getting rid of Jeff Hoffman, one of your more viable pieces of the bullpen, kind of makes you go backwards instead of going forwards. Why would you want to make this bullpen worse rather than make it better? And for the people that say Jeff Hoffman shouldn't be on the team, he doesn't deserve a spot on the Jays, I got nothing for you. Like, this is clearly still one of your better bullpen arms. I'm not going to say he's the number one guy necessarily, but if you wouldn't be comfortable with Jeff Hoffman being rolled out in like the 7th inning, again, I would say 8th inning I'd be comfortable with, but I'll be conservative as we'll say the 7th inning. If you are going to tell me that you don't want to see Jeff Hoffman in that role, like you're simply wrong. That's just what it is. Just going over his stats. I'll go over his playoff stats after this, but just a couple basic stats just to kind of back up what he's done over the last 3 or 4 seasons. I won't really go into 2025 much because we obviously just saw that. But before then, when he wasn't just a closing pitcher, a 3.83 ERA in 2022, a 2.41 in 23, and then a 2.17 in 24, respective whips of, again, 2022 wasn't great for whips. He had a little bit of walk problems that year. A 1.41 whip, and then a 0.92, and then a 0.96 in 2024. So this is a guy that can still be obviously productive at the major league level, and that goes to show in what he did in the playoffs for the Toronto Blue Jays. Other than that, really Miguel Rojas home run. Jeff Hoffman in that postseason had 12.1, so 12 and a third innings pitched, a 1.46 ERA, a 0.81 whip, a walk percentage of 29.2%, and then an opponent slash line of a 143 average, a 250 on base, and a 238 slugging. So, like, again, a guy that would definitely have a spot on this baseball team. So just interesting for me, it would be an interesting move if you wanted to just regress your bullpen instead of, move forward, especially with the bullpen market right now. Would you get a Jeff Hoffman caliber pitcher for that $12 million mark, or where it kind of sits around? Like, you could argue that maybe there's some guys that are better. Maybe there's some guys that would be worse. It's tough to predict right now when you only have really Raisel Iglesias as a price point and as a point to compare. But I just don't think it would make a lot of sense for the Toronto Blue Jays to move off Jeff Hoffman in this situation, unless you're doing like a swap of bullpen arms or something like that. Or maybe you're trading Jeff Hoffman for a, middle starting pitcher, like a middle leverage starting pitcher, like 3-4 guy, whatever that may be. But I think it would have to be one of those unique Ross Atkins trades that you have no idea that it's coming whatsoever, if they were even considering moving Jeff Hoffman.
Yeah, I'm very skeptical on this one. Again, trades in general are very hard to predict. And as much as I want to sit here and say that, this guy is probably on the chopping block, this guy may be on the trade block, no one has a clear-cut answer. Besides that front office, we've seen Ross Atkins do some very weird things that sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. So it's hard to say. And I just don't think that doing this move makes your team better. I think signing another bullpen arm makes your team better. But getting rid of Jeff Hoffman, who was your closer this past season, when you have a guy like Yimi Garcia coming back onto the roster, I think you're looking at this bullpen in a very different light heading into 2026 with him coming back and sort of what you were able to see from some of the young guys that came up for the first time last year. So I don't think just dumping Jeff Hoffman is the best idea, even though there will be questions around Brennan Little and what he brings to the table as well, Carter. So I guess out of my bullpen guys, how do you feel about a potential Brennan Little trade? The only issue I have with this is what kind of weight does Brennan Little hold in a trade? Pretty much nothing. That's the only issue with this.
Yeah, like what are you going to get for Brennan Little? Like, it doesn't make sense to trade Brennan Little for a prospect because that's not really the direction of this team right now. Like, I would rather have Brennan Little than get a team's 10th rated prospect within their system. I don't think Brennan Little's completely done. I think that there's a lot of things that you can get excited about with Brennan Little. Again, I don't think he should be your number one lefty coming out of the bullpen, but if he's one of those guys that maybe starts off in lower leverage situations, a guy that, still has options, he doesn't necessarily have to be with the team to start the 2026 season. So you have a little bit more flexibility with a guy like Brennan Little. So it's a guy that you've seen when it goes well, and you see when he is good, how effective he can be. He had the most innings logged as a relief pitcher. So it's just more so the recency bias with Brennan Little. And again, it was not good at all at the end of it, but I think there is still something there with Brennan Little. So I wouldn't be too prone to move on from a guy like that.
And I'm sort of looking at all these guys that we're going to talk about today as probably part of a package deal. This won't be a 1-for-1. They get, you give up Brennan Little, you get this amazing guy. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I think we have to look at this as part of package deals. Are you okay with giving up on them and or trading them for something hopefully better? And sort of it's risk versus reward in trading some of these guys. So would trading Brennan Little in a package deal be a no-go for you? Or are you absolutely saying if you can get him, put him in a package for something and get something else back? Or is giving up one of your lefties too risky?
See, I'm not actively shopping Brennan Little. If someone's in love with Brennan Little and they're going to offer you something that you can't refuse, for sure. Like, I'm not, married to the idea of Brennan Little having to be on this Toronto Blue Jays bullpen roster in 2026. But I just like you said, like, what kind of value are other teams generating from Brennan Little when he was that bad in the playoffs, when he was that bad in September? Honestly, since the middle of August, like, you really saw the numbers decline because hitters figured out, hey, I just lay off the knuckle curve. It's not going to be in the strike zone almost ever, and I'm probably going to get in advantage counts. So I think it just would be like a very unique situation, almost an impossible situation to move on from Brennan Little and actually get something that you'd value in return. Unless, again, it was one of those middle tier prospects that, like we talk about, we don't necessarily care a ton about. No. Unless it's like your Trey Savage or JoJo Parker. Again, like your top 5 prospects, for sure you can care a little bit more about. But after that, it's a shot in the dark. It's a lottery ticket. Like, you really don't know what you're getting. And from the at least potential that you've seen with Brennan Little, I think that is worth more than, a team's 12th or 15th, whatever rated prospect would be.
Sure. Okay. Well, we're going to come back. We're going to talk about a ton more guys on this roster. How do we feel about a potential trade involving some of these guys? Because that Ross Atkins is always looking at a trade option, but are some guys too important to this club? We'll talk about all that when we return after this short break. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You guys know how much I love FanDuel. I will never stop talking about it because it is my premier place to place my bets. And I've been enjoying the NBA since it's been back, and there's really no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of a game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. I'm a big parlay guy. I don't bet straight up. Ever. I like doing parlays because I throw $5 down, I throw $10 down. Hey, maybe a 3-leg parlay doubles my money, triples my money, whatever it is. I like doing that kind of stuff. And when it's a live game and you're right there, you feel the atmosphere of the game, you sort of think, oh, well, this guy's having a good day. Maybe I'll jump on that quickly early in the game, have that payout later. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. If it's a team you're cheering for, man, it's a ton of fun. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Today's episode brought to you by Dewar. Me and Carter, massive Dewar fans now. We actually we went out for drinks the other night, and we were both like, you know what? It's Dewar jeans. We're throwing them on. It's not that stiff feeling of jeans that you usually get. They got this like athletic wear type of feel to them, but still that jeans material. They really are fantastic. Me and Carter said, we got back at the end of the day, we said, yeah, quality jeans. Tough to beat. And I've talked about it a ton. They're the pioneers of blending the technical innovation with the everyday clothing. They invented the original performance denim. Simply put, Dewar makes the world's most comfortable pants without having to sacrifice any of the style. Trust me, once you try these, you'll never go back. And you can check the Dewar store out in Toronto, 44 Ossington Ave. Pick up a pair for yourself or as an amazing holiday gift. You can mention the promo code LOCKEDONTORONTO in store to get 15% off your first order. Or check them out online at duer.ca/LockedOnToronto for 15% off. That's duer.ca/LockedOnToronto. So, Carter, as we continue on, I'm going to throw out a name. Tell me how you feel. You can throw it back to me. I'll explain where my thinking is. Then you can throw out the next guy, and we'll sort of go down the list because there are some guys I know a lot of Blue Jays fans wouldn't want to see be traded, and maybe some others that maybe just make sense. So I'll kick things off with a different one. I know there are a lot of ways I can go here. I'm going to start off with a guy in Joey Loperfido. How would you feel about a Joey Loperfido trade right now?
Yeah, before I specifically get into that, I would just want to say with a lot of these players, like it obviously depends on what the trade package is. Like if you're getting absolutely fleeced with like these guys, like I'm not necessarily married to any of these guys, like tied to them being on the Toronto Blue Jays for an extended period of time. Like I will say that if like really love a guy, but in terms of Joey Loperfido, like if he was a guy that was in a trade package, for me, like I wouldn't really lose sleep over that. Like Joey Loperfido is a guy that has shown potential. He was very good with the Toronto Blue Jays when he had his opportunities. Yeah. And a lot of this is also dependent on who the Toronto Blue Jays sign in free agency, like what their roster looks like. Or do they have a surplus of outfielders? Will they have a surplus of infielders? So for example, if the Toronto Blue Jays, like we've seen a lot of, sign Kyle Tucker, Joey Loperfido just isn't playing. Like he's not going to play for the Major League club, at least in 2026. And at that point, like if you can find a suitable trade offer, maybe you do flip Joey Loperfido for one of those bullpen arms that you want to take a shot on. That would be something that I would be open to. But with Joey Loperfido, again, a lefty bat. This team has been looking for lefty bats, but with the emergence of Addison Barger, that's not necessarily as much of a necessity. I do think they do add a left-handed bat, whether it is Kyle Tucker, whether, they go and add someone else who we have future trade discussions going on. There's a guy that I really love that's a lefty that I'm not going to give away in this episode specifically, but I would like them to have a lefty bat in that number 2 spot specifically. Again, we're kind of I'm selling my soul on Kyle Tucker right now. Yeah, I'm not going to be too upset with Joey Loperfido being moved. With a lot of these guys, like my biggest thing would be like how I don't view Joey Loperfido as being this massive trade piece, obviously. I think in terms of like a bullpen situation, I'll keep it kind of within the Toronto Blue Jays. I think if you wanted to trade Brennan Little, we'll go back to the first segment, like Brennan Little for Joey Loperfido would probably be like the caliber of move that I would see for both guys in both directions going. Like Brennan Little would be very equivalent to Joey Loperfido. Loperfido being a guy that hasn't necessarily established himself at the major league level, a younger guy that has potential. Brennan Little, again, a bullpen arm that is fairly volatile to say the least, but has shown you that potential as well. So yeah, if Joey Loperfido did get moved, love the guy, love the person, but as the ball player, wouldn't really lose sleep over it.
Yeah, no, I'm in the same boat. I think this is a guy that, yeah, it has value in a trade most likely, and in probably a package situation. You can probably get somebody decent for him and maybe a couple other pieces that you throw in. So I'm not even against this. I think if there is an option where you can get somebody really good and Joey Loperfido's included, I think I'd be all right with that. Carter, another massive guy. Actually, I'm gonna throw you 2 just so you can talk about both of them because I think I know where your head's at with each of them specifically. That's Addison Barger and Ernie Clement. And obviously this does depend on who the Blue Jays get in free agency as well. But 2 guys that a lot of Blue Jays fans are worried are going to be traded or included in some type of trade package that Ross Atkins is going to make. Where do you stand on those 2 guys?
See, I thought you were going to package Nathan Lucas and Ernie Clement together.
Oh, I'm not saying those 2 are a package.
No, I just think that those 2 are more similar than Addison Barger is. I think Addison Barger being younger, 25 years old, having the more power potential. Like I would be more willing to. I love Ernie Clement, but I would rather long term keep Addison Barger just because of the age, just because of the power, the left-handed bat, a cannon of an arm he has in the outfield. Like there's a lot of things that you could get excited about with Addison Barger. And if you're looking for a bigger trade, I think Addison Barger would be a pretty good centerpiece. But again, that's like your Freddie Peralta's. That's your, a Sonny Gray. Like that's like their top of the line. Like that's one of your guys you want to move, probably along with some prospects as well. So with Addison Barger, it would be very tough for me to move on from Addison Barger from what he's shown you. I mean, in the playoffs, he was absolutely phenomenal. Just having the left-handed bat, like that kind of like staple that you need throughout your lineup. With Daulton Varsho, like you've seen the inconsistencies there. It's not really a guy that I would want in the 4-5 spot. I'm more comfortable with him in the 6-7 spot. Whereas Addison Barger, if eventually I would love to see him maybe as a cleanup hitter at one point for the Toronto Blue Jays. So with Barger, I wouldn't be shopping him whatsoever. But I would be listening. If there's, a big trade offer, if you want to go and get that top of the line ace caliber pitcher, I think that's probably the only scenario where I would move Addison Barger is for one of those guys. As for Ernie Clement, and this is why I wanted to do Ernie Clement and Nathan Lucas together. Ernie Clement just set the postseason record in hits. So, I mean, if you want pretty high value, I think teams are obviously going to value that. This is a guy who's 29 years old. This is a guy that had a career year. Again, hasn't really established. You could say now he's established himself. I would say at the major league level, he's had 2 full seasons with the Toronto Blue Jays and has put up pretty solid numbers in both those seasons. Around a 700 OPS, is going to be a Gold Glover caliber defender. He definitely has his use for sure within a baseball team. But if you're making a trade, if you're trading Ernie Clement, you're probably trading him to a contender, and you'd probably be getting prospects back, is what I would think. I don't think that they would be able to make it work where they would just flip, Ernie Clement for a different positional player. And do the Blue Jays benefit from that at that point? Unless, it's this somehow absolute fleece where it's, Grayson Rodriguez is fully healthy, and then you get in Taylor Ward, like that kind of level where, you're getting a significant upgrade from Ernie Clement. I think it just doesn't really make a lot of sense in my head to move on from Ernie Clement based off the value that I at least perceive that he would get in the trade market.
Yeah,
and then I'll throw it over to Nathan Lucas after. We can both kind of talk about that one. And just I know that one, if you look at it with Addison Barger, Ernie Clement, Nathan Lucas, that's probably how I would line it up. Is Barger would be my number 1 priority to keep, then Clement, then Lucas.
Oh yeah, I'm right there with you. And again, I don't view these guys as is somebody specifically looking for Ernie Clement or Nathan Lucas? I don't know that. Or to get that big piece, no, probably not. But maybe a package of Ernie Clement, one of their better prospects, something like that, and a big package, and that gets you something, maybe, right? So for Addison Barger, for me, I think there is going to be a lot of teams asking about this guy and seeing if there is a move that can be made. Especially teams that don't think that they're going to make a huge push next year, that are maybe trying to get rid of one of the really good players, maybe that have a year or 2 left on contract, something like that. Ernie Clement, I think, is a good package piece for a team. If there is a package out there and you can get a very solid middle infielder that is going to just, give you good enough stuff. And I really like Ernie Clement, but I think you'd be crazy not to expect regression from what he did last season. And I'm not saying it's got to be a massive regression, but I don't think he's going to go in there and do exactly what he did from last year. So will there be teams asking about Ernie Clement? I'm a little bit more iffy on that one. I don't know how many asks there will be. And Nathan Lucas Carter, to me, I just think there's not a ton of value there. A guy that's getting older that can do a job, but I think his job is a bench bat that comes in and plays so many games a season and is quality, just like he was last year. And I don't think, again, a guy that he will probably have some regression from last season, but I think he's found a little bit of a stride here. So I think he can be a significant piece for this Toronto Blue Jays team to use. I just don't think he's going to be a massive trade piece necessarily.
See, for me, it's tough with Ernie Clement because there's so much recency bias that can go towards Clement. Again, the postseason record, in hits, just a very good ball player. It's such a good clubhouse guy, a fan favorite around the team. But I really, in terms of other teams, I really don't think that there's too big of a difference between Ernie Clement and Nathan Lucas. Nathan Lucas had a better weighted runs created plus than Ernie Clement, so he was technically a better hitter. When you look at WAR, Ernie Clement was definitely more valuable with all the positions that he could play. Again, with just the amount of jobs he could do, with how significantly better, how much better he was against lefties, just the role there. And Nathan Lucas was pretty good against right-handers as well. Nathan Lucas is 30 years old. Ernie Clement is 29 years old. These are both guys that have predominantly been minor leaguers. So for me, just for both of them, honestly, and for how good they were last year, I probably wouldn't move off of any of them, to be completely honest. I think Ernie Clement benefits this team probably more, obviously, than Nathan Lucas, just with his versatility in the infield and just his ability to, again, put the bat on the ball and literally never strike out whatsoever. But Nathan Lucas has a lot of good qualities to him as well. I think he has a very underrated arm, not as much in the arm strength, but in terms of arm accuracy. His throws are right on the money every single time. The outfield assists, I think he was at 7, I think he ended the year with, which is a pretty good number for Nathan Lucas, a guy that kind of established himself as an everyday outfielder. Whereas this upcoming season, is that his role? Are you going to have to expect as much from Nathan Lucas? And if you have the outfield kind of figured out, Nathan Lucas would be a very good bench bat to have. So the Jays are kind of in this spot now where these guys are very significant to their success. And just if they were going to move off of these guys, and if they were going to trade these guys, the only thing that I could think of was be trading Ernie Clement to a contender. But then again, contenders don't want to get worse if they're making a trade. They don't want their major league club to get worse. So it would predominantly be a younger player or a prospect. And for the Toronto Blue Jays, it just doesn't really make any sense. So unless you're doing this massive trade with, like you said, the trade package where maybe you have Ernie Clement, maybe you have Addison Barger in there as well. And I don't know, we'll throw JoJo Parker in there, for example. And then you're getting, a massive prospect, or not a prospect, a massive player in return. Again, for me, like if you're going to make a trade with the Toronto Blue Jays this season, it should be for a starting pitcher. That would make the most sense for me. And if Ernie Clement is a package in that, and we're getting like a Freddie Peralta, Joe Ryan, I'm not going to be mad at the end of the day. But I think
it's going to suck.
Yes, again, it would there's going to be a hole. There's going to be a hole in your infield. You're going to have to be. There's going to have to be a lot more strategy that is enrolled with this Toronto Blue Jays team, because Ernie Clement is a guy that you could play anywhere. You could probably play him in the outfield if you wanted to. And taking that guy away from a ball club that just went on a World Series run where he was one of the biggest parts of that clubhouse, for me, it'd just be a very tough thing for fans to get behind.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that this team, when you talk about heart and soul players, right, I think there's a couple of guys that come to mind. One of them, obviously, what Trey Savage was able to do in that playoff run. I think he won over a lot of fans. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., obviously. George Springer, obviously. And I think a guy that can't be left off that list is Ernie Clement. He won the hearts of fans. I mean, I see edits about him and Davis Schneider just hugging a lot of the time. And so it's he's definitely a guy that won a lot of the Toronto Blue Jays fans.
And
so
part of this
and we love Ernie Clement.
Oh, I mean, I'm the biggest Ernie Clement supporter of all time. But part of this as well with Ernie is that, is it worth what you're going to get in return? So again, people talk about the chemistry of the Toronto Blue Jays clubhouse all the time and how instrumental that was to their success. And people were talking about Bichette coming back for the World Series, disrupting that success. So if Bichette somehow is going to make that worse, would you think trading the fan favorite in that clubhouse? And again, that's not just the fan favorite. All the players love a guy like Ernie Clement, Nathan Lucas as well, obviously Addison Barger.
A reason why Shane Bieber stayed.
Yeah, exactly. You could say that a lot of it was the clubhouse. You could also say maybe he's betting on himself a little bit more, having one more year. There's, that's a little bit more speculation, obviously.
Well, I meant Ernie Clement because they became really good friends.
With him and Shane Bieber?
Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea about that.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that they were that close. Little tidbit on the clubhouse for Carter on the podcast there. So I guess you're learning. Everyone's learning something.
I'm just on Twitter finding all this little garbage all the time. That
you're probably looking at Ernie Clement's younger brother, and he just has a picture of him, Ernie, and Shane Bieber or something. Just some random Twitter account that I guess I'm just not on the same feed as Brayden is for Twitter. But where the Toronto Blue Jays are now, and you got that close to the World Series, it's going to be really hard to sell fans on separating the team and at least getting rid of players, at least on that major league roster. I think it'd be a lot more easy, at least for us, maybe some fans. Again, some people are just I want to run back the exact same team. I don't think that's a good idea personally, but I think additions, at least for the major league club, and no subtractions from that major league club is probably the Toronto Blue Jays route. So I think if there is a trade, it's going to be prospect oriented.
Yeah, Carter, and I want to talk a little bit about another guy and a couple more pieces of sort of where they're going to fit. And obviously this all matters on the fact who they get in the free agency, right? Who do the Blue Jays sign? And that's going to be a big part. But I want to get your thoughts on a couple other guys, and I know you have a couple of guys to throw at me. So we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. So we've talked about one half of the dynamic duo. But I'll bring up the other guy, and I'm probably not going to love your answer as I'm a huge fan of Davis Schneider. The role for Davis Schneider is slowly dwindling, and I think with this offseason and wanting to make this team better, I don't know where that leaves him, sadly.
It's so tough to predict it now. We're going to have so much more clarity in about a month and a half when the Toronto Blue Jays are pretty close to being done free agency. They make their additions, maybe they make a trade, whatever it is. And you can kind of see how Davis Schneider does fit into the picture. But just looking at it right now, just quickly going over it, obviously, I'm not going to go over the major positions like first base, catcher. We know who's going to be at those positions, obviously, your second base. The shortstop, again, is a little bit up in the air because Bichette's not there. Right now, your third baseman's probably Ernie Clement. You have Anthony Santander playing right field. You got George Springer as your DH. Daulton Varsho, obviously your center fielder. So you have a left field spot and then a third base spot. And that's for Addison Barger. It's for Nathan Lucas. That's for Davis Schneider. That's for Ernie Clement. And that's not even talking about any addition. So that's why we're kind of talking about these trades, because there might be a need based off what the additions are in free agency that they might have to move on from one of these guys. And I think, unfortunately, for a lot of the Blue Jays fan base, and I honestly think for Ross Atkins in that front office as well, Davis Schneider, unfortunately, looks like the odd one out for me. I think you have a guy I love Davis. I love the player. I mean, I love the person, obviously. But in terms of replaceability, a guy that you could replace and probably, not lose too much sleep over it or not lose too much on the production side of things. And just the fit as well. I think Davis Schneider would be that guy that would probably be on the fence. Because you're looking at, like, I prefer Ernie Clement, even if it is at second base. You're looking at left field. They probably prefer Addison Barger there. I know he's predominantly been a right fielder. But with Davis, it's just a tough spot for him right now. He has shown you a lot of flashes. I mean, he hit a home run in the World Series. That was obviously an awesome moment. You get him and Vladdy going back to back. But for me, if there was a candidate, it's probably going to be a Davis Schneider trade. But even then, like, who are you like? I'm not happy getting, a 20th prospect from some team unless you're getting a guy that can contribute immediately with the major league club, like maybe like an Eric Lauer type shot or a Bowden Francis type shot, keeping it Toronto Blue Jays orientated. But like that, Davis Schneider, I guess for me would probably be my one. Unfortunately, if someone was going to get moved,
to me, it really depends on what happens with Bo Bichette. If Bo Bichette doesn't come back, right, you have the second base position open, you have the third base position open, and you have a field spot open, allows them to do a little bit more utility. If Bo Bichette comes back, there's your second baseman, there's your shortstop. Now you just have third base and an outfielder. So that really takes time away because Davis isn't playing third. He would be primarily then a utility outfielder. And I think a lot of questions would start to seep in Blue Jays fans' mind. But I think, again, if you have to be like, oh, do we want Bo Bichette back or do we really want to keep Davis Schneider? I think the answer is pretty easy. So it sucks. Again, I've loved Davis since he came in the league, just his vibe, him coming from, sort of his story of how he got to the MLB and everything. I think it is an amazing story and a very Canadian baseball, easy guy to cheer for type of situation and just how electric he was, Carter. But it's going to be tough for sure.
I'll bring this up to kind of end the episode off. If the Toronto Blue Jays do not get Bo Bichette, but they do sign Kyle Tucker, and that would leave the Toronto Blue Jays outfield looking like Santander, whether it's left or right field. You got Kyle Tucker in the other corner, and then you have Daulton Varsho, George Springer as your DH, pretty much locked up outfield. Would you be more inclined to keep a guy like Davis Schneider who could play that second base spot? Because in this scenario, you don't have Bo Bichette. Again, you could throw him at third base. You don't necessarily love that. And then maybe trade Nathan Lucas away because he doesn't have that regular playing time, or would you still be more prone to keep Nathan Lucas in that situation?
No, I think I would go Davis Schneider in that situation. And again, I think Nathan Lucas last season provided you more, but I think the upside to Davis Schneider, not on an everyday basis, might be higher just because you can get a more consistent long ball from him. And just zone knowledge. Again, we got to think about ABS balls and strike system coming in. That will benefit him and Davis's zone knowledge. So there are a couple of things that really depend on what's going to happen this offseason. I'm not married to that necessarily, but I think that in my head would make the most sense. If it is Bo Bichette, I think that puts Davis on the doorstep. But if it is Kyle Tucker and not Bo Bichette, I think that really places Nathan Lucas in the question mark zone.
I'm just thinking if like that is your outfield, like those are all everydayers. Like as much as people might not want to say Anthony Santander's an everydayer, like the bat's too good to not have in your lineup. Daulton Varsho, obviously. Kyle Tucker. I mean, you get Kyle Tucker. That guy's in the lineup, obviously. And then just looking at the infield, the only thing that I would think is a little bit interesting is that you probably have Addison Barger as your everyday third baseman at this point, if that's what you want to do. And then you have Ernie Clement probably as your second baseman, and then Andres Jimenez. But then you do have obviously some platoon ability with Davis Schneider. If you have a lefty, maybe you don't want Addison Barger going against all the lefties in the world. And then with Nathan Lucas, he just simply would not get playing time ever. He'd get playing time on the rest days. And then Miles Straw, just there's no use at that point for Miles Straw. Again, fan favorite, a guy that, is trying to recruit Kyle Tucker. So maybe we don't want to move on from that guy. Who needs the Japan advertising when you got Miles Straw, advocating for your baseball club. But it's always fun running through these scenarios. It's always fun thinking about the free agents that you could get, the trade possibilities. I think at the end of the day, though, I would try to keep as much of this major league club together in terms of like not subtracting anything. Of course, I want additions, but it worked pretty well last year. I think there's no need to get rid of any of these guys if you don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to be moves. If you add guys, that's going to have to happen. But I think, you don't have to go above and beyond to get rid of these guys just to get rid of them. Yeah. So, I'm 100% on board. As always, we appreciate you guys tuning into the episode. We'll have plenty more to come this week and honestly for the foreseeable future. I think we'll be here, Carter, I'm assuming. So we want to thank you guys for watching. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And we'll talk to you tomorrow.